What's up everyone, it's Johnny Lim, the backpacking biologist, and today I'm going to be going over what kind of gear you need if you're going to get started in backpacking and what kind of gear I have in my bag. Now, I know the whole process of backpacking can be scary, especially if you don't even know where to get started. There's this conception that backpacking gear is expensive, which it kind of is. But you know what? Some of my gear is super old. Some of the gear I have is older than me, and they still work. So you don't always have to get the latest and greatest gear to get started. The most important thing is just to get started. I'm gonna be 100% honest with the gear I have. There's some gear I have that I wouldn't even recommend you get. And the gear I'm gonna show you is gonna be my general backpacking gear. And not assuming there's gonna be snow, not assuming I'm gonna be in the desert, all that stuff. This is what I'm gonna have 90% of the time in my bag. So the first set of gear I have, which might be the most important if you're backpacking, is gonna be the backpack. And I have the Granite Gear Blaze 60 liter. Now, I used to have an REI Flash for years. I ended up beating that up. It started giving me pain in my shoulders. So I decided to upgrade last year, and I've had this for a good year now. I really, really like this bag. It's only 3 pounds and 1.6 ounces, so it's extremely light. What I like about it is it's extremely versatile. This hip strap comes off, and this top brain comes off too, and you could combine it together to make a fanny pack, which is awesome because if you want to just go on a day trip, what I end up doing is I just end up converting it into a fanny pack and I could go on my hike. Another thing I like is that it looks cool, and that's also important. But what you want to look for is something this size. I think 60 liter is going to be perfect for you. If you're going to be a beginner, you should find something that's versatile, something that fits your frame. This is adjustable and has adjustable backing here, so it can fit your torso, but they also have different sizes. I have a small torso, so I think this actually is small. So the next category you need is going to be your shelter. Now, that could be a tent, it could be a bivvy, sometimes it could even be a hammock. For me personally, I only use tents, and I have a few different kinds of tents, but this tent I've had since 2016, I believe. So this is the Big Agnes Copper Spur Ultralight 2-man tent. Now, this tent weighs 3 pounds, 2 ounces, and it's a 2-man tent. But what's nice about having a 2-man tent while you're backpacking solo is that you have a lot of room to put your gear inside your tent as well. I also have access to 2 different sides to the tent. There's 2 different openings so I could go in, which ends up being pretty convenient. Now, the thing with ultralight tents is that they're usually 3-season, which means it's not gonna handle a lot of rain, and it's not going to keep you super warm because these are the things that you have to sacrifice for weight. I have used this tent when it rained a lot and water would leak in, and I have used this tent in the super cold and I end up getting pretty cold. So keep that in mind. This is a perfect summer tent, and I do use it in the cold. You just have to have warmer gear in your body. Overall, I love this tent. Like I said, I don't even know if you could buy it now. Still great, still works fine. I'm gonna keep it for a long time. They do have updated versions that you could check out. I'll put the links there too. So after you have your tent situation figured out, the next category you're gonna need is your sleeping equipment. So to keep yourself warm, you're gonna need some kind of bag to wrap yourself around. So you could use either a sleeping bag or a quilt. And currently, what I'm using is this quilt. It's called the UGQ Bandit. It's 850 fill. If you're doing research, the fill is just how much feathers they put in. The higher the number, the warmer it's gonna be. What's cool about quilts, and especially with this brand, is that you can customize your quilt to a T. I was able to customize the color of the outside, the color of the inside, the shape. I actually love the color, and I chose white because I have a tendency of not really taking care of my gear, like throwing it around, and I figure if I have a white sleeping bag, I'm gonna wanna take care of it more, which actually has been the case. It's still white, so that's, I think, a win for me. Why it's called a quilt is that it opens up and it doesn't zip all the way. This has to be slept with in conjunction with a sleeping pad, which I have and I'll show you later. And you essentially just slip in and it's almost like a blanket. Now, I have to be 100% real with you. This is the first time I ever used a quilt, and I heard a lot of amazing things about quilts. So I switched from a sleeping bag to a quilt. I'm not really the biggest fan of this quilt. This is rated down to 10 degrees, and I'll get cold at 40 degrees. And I spent pretty decent money on it. and I'm fairly sure I'm using it correctly. But what I do like about this is it does stuff down to a small size, and that was a huge upgrade compared to my last sleeping bag. So I am still gonna use this. I'm still testing it out. But yeah, you know, I'm a little disappointed. You could use a quilt. It might not just be for me. Sometimes when I go camp, it'll get down to like 15 degrees. So what I ended up buying in conjunction with the quilt was something called a sleeping bag liner. It's basically another bag to put inside of your quilt or sleeping bag. This is the Sea to Summit Thermalite Fabric Reactor Extreme. I really like this. Now, Sea to Summit claims that this increases whatever bag you use by 25 degrees. And I do have to admit, I do feel a lot warmer when I use this. And whenever I use my quilt, I end up using this as well. Now, remember I told you I had a different sleeping bag? Now, this is my original sleeping bag. And this is what we call a mummy bag, because when you're inside, it wraps around your entire body and over your head, and you look like King Tut. This was a hand-me-down. This is a North Face. I can't even tell you the name of this sleeping bag. I think it was made in the late 90s. It worked for so long. The problem is that over time, the feathers inside the sleeping bag will clump up together and you end up losing a lot of heat. You'll see a lot of gear, especially when it comes to keeping you warm. It has something called an R value. The higher the R value, the warmer it's gonna be. So over time, this has lost its R value and it doesn't keep me as warm as it used to. But to be honest, I would still choose a mummy bag over a quilt, especially if you're gonna just get started, because quilts are pretty expensive, and you could find mummy bags that are relatively cheaper. The biggest downside to this bag is how heavy it is and how big it is when you pack it in. So here's the bag. I'll show you what it ends up looking like. So this is what it stuffs down to, and look how wide it is. This thing's like a sausage. It takes up so much space in my backpack. I can't recommend it. They still make really nice sleeping bags that can pack in a lot smaller. Like I said, this thing was made in the late 90s, that work well. So do your research, look at the R value. Obviously, the higher the R value as well, the more expensive the sleeping bag's gonna be. Amazon's got some great stuff. So next on the sleeping equipment is gonna be your sleeping pad. So I have an inflatable pad, and you could either have an inflatable pad or you could have foam pads. I personally have never used a foam pad before, but I see a lot of people using them. I've always ended up using some kind of inflatable pad. This is my newest pad, which is the Thermarest Neo Air X Therm. So remember I mentioned something called R value. The R value for this is 6.9, which is very high, and it only weighs 1.6 pounds. It comes with this bag that you blow into. The technology with this is really good, and it keeps me really warm. This is what I pair mostly with my quilt. They have a ton of different brands for inflatable sleeping pads. You can find them in Costco, you can find them in Amazon, and you can just use maybe a sleeping pad that isn't inflatable, which I see people use all the time. And those are relatively cheaper. The sleeping pads are a must. You have to elevate yourself from the ground somehow, or else the ground is just gonna be seeping all the heat from your body. Now those are the essentials when it comes to your sleeping arrangement. But the next two things I'm going to show you are more like luxuries that I like. It helps my sleeping experience and it makes me feel more comfortable. The first thing I have is a pillow. And this is an inflatable pillow. It's from Techology and it's only 3.9 ounces. Now what I used to do is I used to just stuff a stuffed bag with clothes and use that to sleep. But honestly, my neck feels a lot better sleeping in this, and I'm also a side sleeper, so it's more conducive to help with the neck. I don't really have neck problems since I've been using a pillow, and I think it's one of those luxury items that will end up making you enjoy your time more. So this next item I cannot recommend more. These are Goose Feet Gear booties. They're 850 fill, they weigh around 4 ounces. And oh my God, when I started camping with these, I decided I could never go camping without them. These are booties for your feet, so they're essentially insulated socks. I like them because they're called goose feet gear because they make you look like a goose. You know, my feet get cold when I sleep. Sometimes socks just won't do it. So I'll put my wool socks on, I'll put my booties on, and I'm telling you, my feet are toasty. I don't have to worry about being cold at all. And the coolest thing is these things packed down, extremely small, and they're so light. So out of all the gear I have, this is one of the things that I'm like super excited about. If you want to splurge on yourself, get one of these. Every time I go backpacking with friends and they see these, they end up getting them. So I'm a huge fan. Some people like to bring more comfort food. Some people like to be ultra light. Depending where I'm going, I personally bring dehydrated food when I go backpacking. And then I bring snacks that make me feel good, like candy. So since I primarily bring dehydrated food, I have to find a way to boil water. And what I use is this MSR Pocket Rocket. Now, when you look for this online, make sure you put in MSR Pocket Rocket, not just Pocket Rocket. You'll probably end up finding something you don't really, well, you might want it, I'm not sure. But what's cool about this is it's ultra light, it's small, and it goes on top of a propane tank. And you need to get one of these small propane tanks. They make larger ones. And these tanks last for a long time. So essentially, you turn this on and you can hear, right? You hear the gas coming out. The thing that this Pocket Rocket doesn't have, it doesn't come with an igniter. So that means if you bring one of these, you're gonna need some kind of ignition source. Now, the next thing I have is a titanium pot. Now, remember I said I have a lot of things that are old. This is one of those items. It is a titanium ever new. Opens up like a pot right here. When it comes to pots, it's gonna either be titanium or aluminum because those are gonna be your lightest metals. Titanium is light and strong. Aluminum is light, but it's not gonna be as strong and it's not gonna be as light as titanium. I don't know if they make them anymore. Just go online and type in titanium pot, ultralight pot. This is metal, so you don't want something too heavy. Next, what you're gonna need is utensil. Now they have a ton of different kinds of utensils out there. This one is a titanium spork by Tokes. It's really light. And what I like about it is it's extra long. Like I told you, I eat dehydrated foods and they come in this bag. I used to have one of those sporks that were smaller. Since it was small, I had to put my hand in the bag and I get food on my hand. So I ended up buying this ultra long spork, and it's great because now I don't have to get my fingers dirty when I eat inside the bag. What I don't like is the covering that it comes in. The inside is fraying, so every time I take it out, the spork tongs get caught on it, which is just annoying, but I like it a lot. So lastly, what you need to worry about is your water. Usually when you go backpacking, there isn't gonna be like a spigot of water that's just gonna come out. So most likely what you're gonna need is something to purify your water. Now there are three things, to my knowledge, that you can buy. You could buy a filter, you can buy tablets to treat the water, or you can buy a UV pen. I personally have a filter, and I have this filter right here. It's called the Sawyer Squeeze. Now there are different kinds of filters. There's a pump filter that you could have. The problem with those is they're kind of heavy and there's a lot of moving parts that you don't really want to rely on too much. I've been on camping trips where I've used other pump filters and everyone got sick. I switched to this, which is the Sawyer Squeeze. And it's great because you can squeeze the water. It works really well. It's decently fast. And what's cool is you could actually use it as a gravity filter. So what that means is I could just have a bag connected to this and I don't even have to squeeze it. I can just put it in the bag. Now the water is going to go through the filter just using gravity, and then the clean water is going to collect in a different bag. What I don't like about this is the kind of bags it comes with. Now this is the standard bag it comes with. It's super cheap and it has a tiny opening. So how it works, you just twist this on top and you just squeeze it through. The problem with this bag that it comes with is you have to fill the water through this hole. So if there's not a lot of water in your water source, like I've been in places where the stream is like, not even a stream, it's like a trickle. You have to like scoop the water in gingerly. Or even if the water's freezing cold, you have to like stick your hand in the water. It takes a lot longer to fill this up and it's not that big. So what I ended up doing is I ended up upgrading to a different bag. And this is a 4-liter dromedary by MSR. So what's great is this is 4 liters of water. I find that I could just fill this up once for the night and I'm good for the rest of the night. I don't even need water anymore. And this front part opens up and I could just twist the filter on here and use this as a gravity filter. And you know, it kind of looks like, but I'm a big fan of this combo. This dromedary bladder is really tough. I don't have to worry about leaking. One of the downsides to having filters though is you do have to clean it once in a while. This comes with a kit where you have to backwash the water. That just means you take clean water and push it through the other side. If you don't clean it often, sediment starts to build up in the filter and it ends up slowing down the process. And it's already not the fastest process. So you do have to clean them. And another downside is that if you're in freezing temperatures, you have to sleep with this in your sleeping bag. And that's because if there is water in here and it freezes, water expands, you might end up cracking your filter, and if the filter cracks, it's gonna render it useless. Whenever it's below freezing, I always put this in my sleeping bag, which also makes the pens really nice. The pens ends up using UV light to kill all the bacteria, and I've used that, my buddy has it, and it works like a dream. They're kind of expensive, but you don't have to worry about it freezing. That's a positive. And then you have the tablets. The tablets are cool. They have iodine tablets. Sometimes it just makes your water taste weird. I can't recommend it. If you're gonna be in another country, like backpacking in another country where you're getting water from, let's say, like Amazon and it's stagnant, maybe a tablet in conjunction with a filter might be a good idea, but for the most part, I don't really suggest having tablets. Now we've talked about the food, now we gotta talk about the storage. I live in California and we have a ton of bears here. There are 30,000 bears living in the Sierra Nevadas, and there's bears all over the United States. So you do have to keep in mind where to keep your food. I have two methods of food storage. The first one I have is a bear canister. Now if you're backpacking in the Eastern Sierra Nevadas, a bear canister is actually required. This is the Bear Vault 450. I could keep all my dehydrated food here. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't really do long treks. So this is big enough to keep all the food I'm gonna need. This opens up and it keeps your food safe. I have seen videos of bears being able to break them, so they're not 100%, but yeah, there's some percent. I haven't had a problem yet. The kind of annoying thing is it does add extra weight to your bag, but it is somewhat annoying too because it does take up a lot of space. You can't like squeeze it in your bag. But if it's required, it's required. And I mean, you don't want to mess with the bag. I mean, if you keep your food in your backpack will get destroyed. I kept food in my old backpack and a squirrel ripped a hole through it just to eat some nuts. So better safe than sorry. But if you don't want to use a bear bag and you have the option to use something else, I use a dry bag. And this is a Seal Line dry bag. I don't know how many liters this is. I think it's 20 liters. And it's great because it's a dry bag. That means it's waterproof. I don't know how much it seals in the sense, but it shouldn't really matter because what you do is you put your food in here, you roll it up, and then you clip it, and then you could throw this up into a tree using line. And I always bring line with me. I use line to throw it up into a tree and keep it away from the bears. It does squeeze into your bag a lot better than a bear canister. So we're done with food. Next we have fire. And fire is something that you have to be very careful of. It can get out of hand and you can have forest fires. And I mean, one just happened recently. She ended up causing this huge forest fire trying to boil water. And there's a lot of different rules for fires. A lot of places, like for instance in the Eastern Sierra Nevadas, doesn't allow for fires. But if you just go across a mountain to Sequoia, they do allow fires. So you really just have to do your research where you're gonna backpack if they allow fire. What I like to bring for fire is a fire kit. So in my kit, I have two methods of making fires. I have a lighter, and if you want expediency, you're just gonna use a lighter. But then I also have a ferro rod, which shoots out sparks. Now, it's harder to make a fire with ferro rod. On top of that, I have something called a pocket bellows. And this is another one of those equipment that I will honestly never go without again. I mean, it looks kind of like a little telescope, right? It's like an old antenna. And it's just like a bellows. You just blow into the fire. And I've been in situations where I was in the snow and the fire looked like it was gonna die. I just busted this thing out and the fire just came right back to life. It is a godsend when it comes to fire in the rain, fire in the snow, or any kind of wet wood. Like I said, not every place allows fires, so definitely do your research before you actually make a fire. Next, we have the sharp things. So that's gonna be your knives and maybe a saw. I think there's a bit of contention between the backpacking community whether to have a knife. I bring a knife every time I go camping, but I've never had to use it in a defensive situation. Now, I don't always bring this knife with me since it's a little bigger, but this is a Mora knife companion. This is one of the first legit knives I bought, and I think when it came out, it was only 15 bucks. I don't think it's too far from 15. It might be like $17 now. And for a $17 knife, this is honestly the best knife I've ever owned. Could not recommend this enough. One of those top items that I have. It's super sharp and it's easy to sharpen. That's another great thing about it. Awesome for woodworking. The next knife I have is actually attached to my backpack. It's called the Essie Azula 2. It's a small neck knife. I bring this a lot of times if it's going to be a longer backpacking trip and I know I don't have to do fine woodworking. If I'm gonna do fine woodworking, I'm gonna bring my Mora knife. If I'm not, I bring this, and it just stays right there in my back strap. One, it's really handy. It's perfect for gutting fish. It's perfect for small camp tasks. And two, it's just always on my person. It's really easy to get out if I need it. And honestly, it looks pretty cool in my backpack. And then lastly, I have a saw. Now this is a silky saw and it's called the Big Boy, and it's pretty big. As you can see, it's not too heavy actually, which is pretty cool. I am in love with this thing. I can cut and process so much wood with this. I brought this on my Yellowstone backpacking trip and I was just cutting wood like no other. This is also one of those top items that I have that I just absolutely love. I cannot recommend this more. And it's just so easy to use. I bring this car camping, and if I'm able to process wood while backpacking, I will bring this rather than a hatchet, because hatchets are so heavy and this just makes light work of smaller pieces of wood. So next, I have another luxury item that is not completely necessary, but ever since I started using it, I absolutely love it. And that is my Thermarest Z seat. Now, what's cool about this is it's literally just like a butt pad. You can sit down on it and it's insulated. What's good about this is that if it's wet, if it's raining, if there's snow, you always have a nice seat for your butt. It's super lightweight, it doesn't take that much space. And like I said, it's luxury, it's not necessary, but it's one of those things that makes me feel good when I take it out. Next, we have your lights. What kind of lights are you gonna bring? Most of the time, you're gonna want a headlamp, and I have the Black Diamond 350 lumen spot. They make different kinds of headlamps. Some have an extra battery pack in the back. I find those cumbersome. I like this. The downside of this is it uses AAA batteries, so those run out a lot. I'd much rather have one that is rechargeable. And I have been in situations where when the battery starts dying, the light starts getting a little dimmer. But if you do have the option to get a headlamp that's rechargeable, I would take that. Next is another luxury item. This is definitely not necessary, but it's one of those things that I also feel good when it's around, and it's a lantern. It is a lantern. And this one is the Luminaid Pack Light Firefly. It's rechargeable, it's solar powered as well, and you just inflate it. Takes one breath, and I almost bring it every time I go backpacking, because I will admit this, I get scared when I'm by myself. When I'm solo backpacking, thoughts do start running in my mind. Is there a bear? Is it like, what did I hear out there? Are there ghosts? Like, honestly, these are things that I think about. Having a light just out in the distance or right over you makes me not as afraid, you know, if that makes sense. Now that your surroundings are illuminated, it makes things less scary. And what I like about this is it's not like super bright. It's really nice. It's easy on the eyes. It creates a nice glow. So I bring this all the time. Like I said, it's luxury, you don't need to have it. I do suggest it for people who might be a little afraid of nature when they go out. I get scared sometimes. Last, and definitely not least, we have clothing. Now, clothing is one of those things that can either be super expensive or really cheap, depending on really your personality. Me, I don't know, I honestly don't really care. As long as it keeps me warm and it's semi-light, then I'll take it, give it to me. Although what I think is a non-negotiable is a nice pair of wool socks. Wool is great because it's moisture wicking. They don't smell as bad at the end of the day, which is a major plus. Keeps your feet super warm, unlike cotton, and they're really nice to sleep in as well. So wool socks, definitely a must. I do have a pair of thermal pants, like long johns. These are from Colombia. I think these are one of the few like clothing items I do have that's like kind of expensive but lightweight, and it does keep me warm. My legs get cold at night. That's just how it is, right? So I want to keep them warm. My feet get cold. I want to keep them warm. I spend money on that. I do have gloves. They're just REI gloves. Nothing special about them. Keep my fingers warm. As far as shirts, I mean, you could get anti-sweat shirts. I've seen collared shirts that are meant for backpacking. I honestly just wear normal shirts. Like I said, I'm not a super ultralight backpacker. Normal shirt's fine. Now, one thing I think you should do your research on is the jacket. If you're backpacking up in the mountains, it will get cold. You want something that's down. This will keep you insulated. And if you can, get something that's waterproof or at least water resistant. Down jackets, for the most part, are water resistant. They're not waterproof. That means if they get too wet, the water will end up seeping inside the jacket. And if the feathers in a down jacket get wet, it will render them pretty much useless. So I have a Prana jacket. I have so many videos wearing this jacket. It is my favorite jacket that I own. It keeps me super warm. I mean, you don't have to get Prana. You could get anything else. Go to Costco. Costco is so good. They have so much cheap equipment. You won't even know how much cheap equipment they have. It doesn't have to be expensive. Other things you need to be conscious of is headgear. I always bring either a hat or a beanie, or sometimes I bring both. Underwear, they sell them at Costco. Get a nice pair of underwear that is antimicrobial, and that way, you know, they don't start stinking up after one day. I forgot my buff at home, but a buff is something you can put around your neck, put it over your head to keep warm. I use it sometimes as a blindfold to help me sleep at night. They're extremely useful. Buffs are cool. And the last thing you gotta think about is, what are you gonna put on your feet? What shoes are you gonna wear? This could be a whole nother video on itself. Everyone has their own different kinds of preferences when it comes to their shoes. You could have trail runners, you can have hiking boots, you can have just normal running shoes. Personally, they all work. I find that I need more support, so I use either hiking boots or trail runners. The hiking boot I have are Merrel's. I don't remember the name of this. When I first bought this, it was supposed to be waterproof. It's definitely not like that anymore. This soaks in so much water. I got this back in, you guessed it, 2016. It's time for an upgrade. But I like this. It's half leather, half synthetic, and they're pretty comfortable. They go a little bit higher on the ankle, so I do feel protected. Other than the water issue, I don't really have too many complaints. And then I also have these Salomon trail runners. These are great if I know I don't have to really worry about water. These are extremely comfortable, and the good thing is that they're lightweight. Trail runners are designed to be more flexible, more comfortable. I'm a big fan of these, but like I said, it's seasonal. Like if it's winter time, most likely I'm not gonna bring these. More of like a summer shoe. Well, that's all the gear I have. I do have more gear, but like I said earlier, this gear is gonna find its way in my backpack probably 80 to 90% of the time. If I'm gonna go snow camping, I add more things. If I'm gonna go to the desert, I'm gonna add different things. It really just depends where you're gonna go. Now, backpacking doesn't have to be a scary thing. At least for the gear, don't worry too much about it. You don't have to have the nicest gear. You don't have to have the most lightweight gear. All you gotta have is to have gear that make you feel comfortable, that make you feel good, to where when you go out, you're gonna wanna go backpacking again. You know, backpacking's supposed to be fun. And I think it's one of the funnest things in the world. And I think if more people did this, the better the world's gonna be. Out here in nature, where there's no cell phone service, it's kind of a therapy in its own right. If you have any questions about backpacking, if you want any recommendations, just put it down in the comments section. I reply to all comments, positive and negative. If you need help with anything, just reach out. And if you like this content, be sure to subscribe, like the video. This really helps with the algorithm. Education is something that needs to be passed down. And these are skills that will be passed down to friends, to my future kids, to anybody. Just have it, take all the knowledge I have. I don't care. I think the more knowledge I'm able to transfer to you, the better the world's gonna be. And I'm the backpacking biologist. I'll see you another time. Love you guys. Take care.